Hey, friends, and welcome to With Love, Crystal Nicole. I'm Crystal, and this is a space for honest conversations about life, growth, reinvention, and becoming the woman you are meant to be. My hope is that you leave every single conversation feeling seen, encouraged, and a little more confident in who you're becoming. So grab your favorite drink, get comfortable, and let's have a conversation, sis. With love, Crystal Nicole. Hey, friends, welcome back to With Love, Crystal Nicole. Today's conversation is for the woman who feels like she's standing at the edge of something new, but she's afraid to take that first step. Maybe you're considering a career change, starting a business, leaving a relationship, or maybe stepping into a new season of life. Or maybe you're just at that point where you're simply realizing that the life you've been living no longer aligns with the woman you're becoming. So if that's you, pull up a chair because today we're talking about starting over. And if I'm being completely honest, this conversation is just as much for me as it is for you. Recently, I made the decision to walk away from something that I had been a part of for 8.5 years. 8.5 years, y'all. That's a very, very long time. It is long enough to build relationships, to build routines, long enough to become known for something, long enough for it to become a part of your identity. And while I knew it was time for a new season, that definitely did not make the decision easier for me because starting over always sounds exciting when you're looking at somebody else's life, but it feels completely different when it's your own life, when it's your income, when it's your community, when it's a part of the thing that you do daily, when it's your future, or at least the future that you thought you saw for yourself. And if I'm being completely honest, I was scared. Not because I was afraid of, the hard work that comes with starting over, because I've never been afraid of hard work. I was really, really afraid of the unknown. I wrestled, with the decision for years. I had endless conversations with my husband about it. I talked to my mom and my sisters about it. And it got to a point, where I was losing sleep because I was just wrestling with this decision. And I was trying to talk myself into staying somewhere that I knew God was calling me out from. And that fear just kept showing up because, this thing was my income, it was my sole source of income. And so I was afraid of the unknown. And looking back, I think I knew before I was willing to admit that it was time for me to go. But again, fear. One thing that I have learned about fear is that fear talks a lot. Fear loves questions. What if this doesn't work? What if I'm making a mistake? What if I fail? What if people don't understand? What if I'm too old? I mean, I am 47, right? What if my best years are behind me? Fear can be so, so noisy. And if I'm being completely honest with y'all today, some of those thoughts crossed my mind too. Not because I doubted God, because I'm human, you know? And I'm the type of human that loves certainty. I love to make plans. I love guarantees. I don't like the what ifs. I love knowing exactly how everything is going to work out. I've always been that way. But the one thing that I learned is that faith does not operate that way. Faith requires us to trust before we have all the answers. The biggest lie that I had to confront wasn't even about that business. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't even about the success. The biggest lie I had to confront was this: maybe I'm just too old to start over. Maybe I've already hit my prime. Maybe my best years are behind me. Maybe this is as good as it gets. Be honest. Have you ever believed a lie like that? Have you ever told yourself a lie like that? Maybe not those exact words, but maybe you've thought it's too late, or I should have done this years ago, or I missed my opportunity, or I should have it all figured out by now. But honestly, the more that I sat with those thoughts, the more I realized something. Those weren't God's words, it was fear. because nowhere in my life has God ever suggested that he was finished with me. Nowhere. In 47 years of existence. Now let's talk about this point because this is the part that really challenged me. Sometimes we stay in places long after God has called us to leave, okay? And I'm talking about me. I don't know if I'm talking about you, but I'm definitely talking about me. Not because we don't hear him, not because we don't know, but because leaving is hard. And if I'm being honest, the hardest part was not the work. It wasn't the uncertainty. It wasn't even starting over. It was the people for me. When you've spent years pouring into people, helping people, encouraging people, serving people, and leading people, you begin to feel responsible for them. So I always told myself, they need me. What will happen if I leave? Who will help them? What will they think? And before you know it, you've convinced yourself that your assignment is to stay, even when God is clearly showing you it's time to go. I really had the hardest time walking away from the people because I loved those people. I mentored them, I coached them, I felt responsible for them. I felt guilty because, they were there because of me, because I said yes to an opportunity. Almost 6,000 people, came through that business because of me. So I felt a huge load of guilt on my shoulders. I was torn between, being obedient to God and my loyalty to those people. I spent a lot of time worrying about what would happen to everybody else and not enough time asking what God was trying to do in me. That was a hard lesson for me to learn because commitment is a beautiful thing. Loyalty is a beautiful thing. Serving people is a beautiful thing. Commitment says, I made a promise, so I have to stay. Commitment says, I've invested too much time to walk away now. Commitment says, people are counting on me. Commitment says, what will everyone think if I leave? But obedience asks a different question. Obedience asks, what is God asking me to do in this season? And sometimes those two things are aligned, but sometimes they're not. Sometimes we're honoring yesterday's assignment while ignoring today's instruction. Let me say that again. Sometimes we're honoring yesterday's assignment while ignoring today's instruction. And that was a hard realization for me because I realized that part of what was keeping me stuck wasn't purpose. It wasn't calling. It wasn't even loyalty. It was fear. Fear disguised as commitment. Fear disguised as responsibility. Fear disguised as loyalty. And once I saw it for what it really was, I couldn't unsee it. I had to ask myself if I was staying because God was truly asking me to stay, or if I was staying because I had become comfortable carrying an assignment that had already expired. And that's a difficult question to sit with. Because sometimes the hardest thing you'll ever do isn't staying. Sometimes the hardest thing you'll ever do is trusting God enough to leave, y'all. You're not leaving because you're angry. You're leaving because you've outgrown the assignment. I was at a point where I was grateful for the season. I was grateful for the people that God, assigned me to. I was grateful for all the love shown to me. I was grateful for the community I was able, to grow. I appreciate every lesson because I became a woman that I never saw myself becoming as an introvert at that. And I will forever be grateful for the things that I learned while I was there. Sometimes God isn't removing you from something because it's all bad. Sometimes He's just calling you into something that is better aligned. I had to remind myself of a few things. One of those things was God never asked me to be anyone's savior. That's His job. The people that I loved in that organization, they'll be okay. The people that I poured into, they'll be okay. Because the same God who took care of them while I was there will definitely continue taking care of them after I'm gone. And it's a huge responsibility to carry, y'all. Like I can't even put into words how heavy it was. It was just so heavy. It was so heavy to the point where I was just like, God, please just remove me from this because I'm not strong enough to do it on my own. And I think that at a certain point, God knew that I just didn't have the strength to do it on my own. So He made me so uncomfortable that I had no choice but to leave. I was just, y'all, when I tell you I was so uncomfortable, I was extremely uncomfortable. I was to the point where I was like, you know what? I just can't be attached to this anymore. And when I finally let go, the peace that I felt in my life, y'all, it it's the most amazing feeling that I had felt in a very long time. It was like this huge weight just lifted off my shoulders. One of the biggest lessons that this season is teaching me is that starting over is not punishment, it's preparation. This isn't happening to me, it's developing me. And when I look back over my life, every difficult season that I have been in has developed something in me. Becoming a young mother developed something. Becoming a single mother developed something. Those financial struggles definitely developed something. Heartbreak, it developed something in me. Every season. And this season that I'm currently in is no different. If I could sit across from every woman listening to this right now, this is what I would tell her. You're not too old. You're not too late. Your story is definitely not over. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. God has already given you everything you need for the season that He's calling you into. You don't need all the answers. You don't even need the entire plan. You don't need to see the whole staircase. You just need enough faith to take the next step. And then the next one after that. It doesn't matter if God is calling you out of a job, if He's calling you to start a business, to start over after heartbreak. You just have to take the next step, boo. You got to have enough faith. Trust me, I understand. It can be so scary to walk away. But if you're a believer like I am, then you already know that God got you. He will never leave us. We just have to have enough faith to take the next step. Before I sign off today, I want to leave you with a question. What are you holding on to because you're afraid to let go? And what is it that God is trying to do in your life if you finally trusted Him enough to release it? I want you to sit with that. I want you to pray about it. I want you to think about it. Because your next chapter may be waiting on the other side of your obedience. I'm sitting here as a witness right now. So many doors have opened since I let go of that thing that I was holding on to so tight that God had called me out of 3 years ago. I delayed God's plan because I was afraid to take that step. If there's one thing that I hope you take away from today's conversation, it's this: you can do the hard things. God has prepared you for such a time as this. And sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do is trust Him enough to begin again. As always, I want to thank y'all for spending this time with me today. Until the next time, please take care of yourself, give yourself grace, and keep becoming. With love, Crystal Nicole.